For years, Detroit had massive amounts of vacant housing, entire blocks of abandoned homes, burned out structures, empty properties, and census methodologies can get complicated when cities have huge amounts of ghost housing inventory. So what Detroit is basically saying here is the numbers are now more accurately reflecting occupied housing instead of penalizing the city for demolishing abandonment. So let me get ahead of the naysayers that will be in the comments, right? This does not mean the growth is fake, but it does mean that the story is more nuanced than thousands of people suddenly moved here. For decades, America watched Detroit become the national symbol of population loss, abandoned homes, bankruptcy, disinvestment, and urban collapse. Now, suddenly the headlines are actually changing. Get this, the city gained over 5,000 residents, 3 straight years of growth, new housing, new development, new energy. Is Detroit actually growing, or are we just finally counting Detroit differently? Because while cranes go up downtown, while old schools become luxury apartments, while investors rush into neighborhoods, a lot of longtime Detroiters are still struggling with things like taxes, insurance, affordability, transportation, blight, stagnant wages, and even still housing insecurity. So today I want to react to this news not just as a content creator, but as a real estate developer actively building in Detroit. Because trust me, the reality on the ground is way more complicated than the headlines. Detroit isn't just a city. Detroit is actually one of the greatest urban comeback experiments happening in America in real time right now.
Mayor Mary Sheffield has said growing Detroit's population is one of her top priorities, and according to new data, the city is trending in the right direction. Detroit led the state in population growth last year, marking the 3rd straight year of growth after 6 decades of annual decline.
Nice.
Hannah McElroy breaks down the numbers.
Detroit is continuing its run of population growth for the 3rd year in a row, and city leaders say it's due in part to housing investments like the redevelopment of this West Side school that's being turned into over 100 units of mixed income housing.
Now, as they mentioned, this is the 3rd straight year of growth after 6 decades of annual decline. That line right there is historic because people outside Detroit don't fully understand how psychologically damaging 6 decades of population decline really was. Detroit wasn't just losing people, Detroit was losing confidence. Every year, less tax revenue, more vacant homes, more infrastructure strain, school closures, retail decline, insurance problems, service reductions. Imagine not knowing if your garbage was going to get picked up or if you called 911, if anybody was going to show up. People forget Detroit once had nearly 2 million residents. Today we're under 700,000. Think about that for a minute. That means this city still has infrastructure built for almost 3 times the current population. That creates enormous financial pressure. This is called legacy infrastructure burden. Detroit still has roads, sewer systems, water lines, utility systems, public lighting, emergency services spread across a huge geographic footprint, but there are fewer taxpayers paying into that system. That's one reason older industrial cities struggle financially compared to newer Sunbelt cities. And let's be honest here, 3 years of growth is encouraging, but it does not automatically mean Detroit is fully back. We as a city need to be careful not to confuse stabilization with full recovery. That's an important distinction. Now, as a developer, I can tell you that there's still a massive gap between buzz and actual project feasibility. A lot of projects still struggle because construction costs are way too high, appraisals are way too low, financing gaps exist, insurance is expensive, interest rates hurt deals, infrastructure work kills budgets. So yes, momentum is real, but the math is still brutal. Now, when it comes to the redevelopment of this West Side school being turned into over 100 units of mixed income housing, this is where things get interesting because adaptive reuse projects like the one in the background here are becoming one of the defining features of Detroit's comeback. Let's talk about what adaptive reuse actually means. Adaptive reuse is taking an old structure, schools, churches, warehouses, old office buildings, factories, and converting them into something new instead of demolishing them. And Detroit is perfect for this because the city has enormous historic building stock, including the one as you see in the back of this picture. But what people don't realize is these projects are extremely difficult financially. Most adaptive reuse deals require historic tax credits, brownfield incentives, affordable housing financing, layered debt, grants, philanthropic support, tax abatements, new market tax credits, sometimes environmental remediation funding. These are the types of capital stacks that can look like absolute chaos. But a majority of people are going to see this school and say, oh, they turned an old building into apartments. No, this project took years of pre-development and a lot of work on the developer's side before construction even started.
Shauna Jones grew up in Florida. She's lived in cities all across the country, but says she found her forever place right here.
It was just like, how do I have so many friends from Detroit? Wait a second. And then you hear a lot about the buzz of Detroit, the affordability, the housing. And then you hear about the Four Seasons. And then you start to see like your friends move back home. And so it's just a couple different things and everybody's kind of swirling. And then you check it out for yourself and it's like, oh, wow, this is a great place to land.
Now, this is probably the single biggest reason Detroit is attracting people right now. Affordability. Nationally, people are getting crushed in cities like New York, LA, Toronto, Austin, Miami. Middle-class life is becoming mathematically impossible. Detroit still represents opportunity. You can still buy a house, start a business, rent a decent apartment, launch creative projects, and even invest in neighborhoods right here in this beautiful city without needing Silicon Valley money. This may be one of the last major American cities where regular people still feel like they have a shot. However, Detroit's affordability partly exists because of decades of disinvestment. That's the paradox. The same conditions that created opportunity also created abandonment, poverty, weak appraisals, blight, population loss. So the challenge becomes, how do you improve neighborhoods without pricing people out? That's the billion-dollar question.
According to new census data, Detroit gained more than 5,000 residents since May 2025 and leads the state in population growth.
Year after year, families left, population shrank, and too many people counted Detroit out. But today the numbers tell a different story, and they tell the real story of what is happening in our city. A city that is rising higher, a city that is growing stronger, gaining momentum and vitality, a city where opportunity and momentum and possibility are.
Another big change impacting those numbers. Demolitions of abandoned homes no longer count against Detroit's population totals, giving a more accurate picture of who's actually living in the city.
We want Detroit to be a city where families can afford to stay, where young people can build their futures, where seniors can age with dignity, and where every resident, no matter their zip code, feels connected to the progress that is happening across our city.
For years, Detroit had massive amounts of vacant housing, entire blocks of abandoned homes, burned out structures, empty properties, and census methodologies can get complicated when cities have huge amounts of ghost housing inventory. So what Detroit is basically saying here is the numbers are now more accurately reflecting occupied housing instead of penalizing the city for demolishing abandonment. So let me get ahead of the naysayers that will be in the comments, right? This does not mean the growth is fake, but it does mean that the story is more nuanced than thousands of people suddenly moved here. Part of this is actual migration, improved counting, demolition cleanup, census methodology changes, and also more accurate occupancy tracking. Accurate population data affects federal funding, transportation dollars, housing programs, political representation, school planning, and also infrastructure funding. Now, if you're a developer, population growth matters because lenders love growth narratives, right? Banks feel safer when lending into cities perceived as growing. That changes retail confidence, multifamily lending, investor appetite, land values, business recruitment. Narrative matters in real estate a lot. Now, when it comes to Detroit wanting to be a city where families can afford to stay, this right here is the entire battle. Not growth, not development, not cranes, retention. Can longtime Detroiters actually benefit from the comeback? Because nationally, we've seen this movie before. The neighborhood starts to improve, but then all of a sudden, taxes rise, rent rises, insurance rises, investors arrive, legacy residents get squeezed. Now, Detroit has a chance to potentially write a different story here, but it's going to require intentional policy, affordable housing preservation, home ownership support, tax protections, transit investment, neighborhood retail workforce development. All of those things we need to have in conjunction with the growth of this great city of Detroit, right? Because growth without inclusion eventually creates backlash. But I can tell you that this tension is very real. Developers are constantly battling project feasibility, affordability, lending requirements, construction costs, neighborhood expectations, city approvals. People online sometimes act like developers are just printing money. Meanwhile, interest rates are high, insurance is exploding, construction prices unstable, And appraisals still don't support many neighborhoods. In other words, the reality is far more complicated.
In the last 3 years, Detroit has gained 15,000 residents. Mayor Sheffield hopes to build on that by adding 1,000 new single-family homes during her term. The city says they're also actively fighting against what they're calling an artificial reduction due to the county cap rule. They say it undercounts residents and impacts the amount of federal funding the city receives.
Now, with the mayor's goal of adding 1,000 single-family homes to the city of Detroit during her first term, that's a very important signal because for years, Detroit development was heavily centered around downtown apartments, mixed-use projects, adaptive reuse developments, and multifamily properties. But stable cities also need families, home ownership, middle-class retention, neighborhood-scale investment, right? All of that is going to help a city get to a point where it's healthy again. But let's keep it real here. Single-family construction in Detroit is extremely difficult because of the appraisal gap, meaning if it costs $350,000 to build a house, but the market only appraises it at $220,000, that gap kills financing almost immediately. But in my opinion, over the years, the city of Detroit has become one of the most important housing laboratories in America because, unlike land-constrained cities, Detroit still has room. The question is, can the city rebuild density intelligently without repeating past mistakes? So since we're talking population growth and actually attracting new people to the city of Detroit, not to mention they have different down payment assistance programs available for individuals that are considering the move to the city of Detroit. Let's see what's on the market. Now, right away, I come across a property. It's pending. This is on East Outer Drive. $29,900 was the asking price. I'm not sure if it went over or under, but it only has one picture. This is a brick home, 3-bed, 1.5 bath, beautiful property. And wow, right? This property looks amazing. I'm not quite sure if anything is wrong with this site, but $29,900, that is a phenomenal price. Even if you have to go in and gut a majority of this property, which I hope that's not the case, but wow. Here's a house that is currently for sale for $165,000. Beautiful, beautiful property, as we can see. Brick home, roof looks like it's in decent shape. I'm going to go back and look at this front door. Do you know how much it would cost to replicate a door like that? Probably $5,000-$6,000. Easy, right? This property looks good. Let's check the interior. Interior looks solid. It has forced air, and that's a benefit because you can, attach a condenser and have air conditioner. If this doesn't already have it, it may already have it in place. Property looks really solid. Kitchen looks good, right? Looks complete. Let's see if it has furnace and the hot water tank in the basement. Color on the wall looks pretty solid. Another thing to point out too is this property has solid wood doors throughout, right? I know that might not necessarily seem like that big of a deal, but when we're talking about solid wood doors, closet doors and bedroom doors and bathroom doors, those doors are massively expensive in 2026. And so those details really do matter for the individuals that are looking at buying a house that actually is made of good material. And I can guarantee you these walls are plaster. But, you got wood floors throughout. The bathrooms look complete, right? Nothing too fancy, but, you don't need a fancy bathroom. And not to mention those tiles look amazing. I'm not quite sure if those are the original tiles from when the house was built, but I can assure you that this house was more than likely built in the 30s. I could be wrong, but I would assume that this is a 1930s property. Basement looks dry, which is extremely important. Has a bathroom down there. Just got to throw some drywall up to finish the basement if you would like to do so. Let me go back. I saw the hot water tank, and here's the furnace as well. So it's an older furnace. So it's probably not energy efficient, but at the same time, this property is complete. So what that also means is it will pass an inspection when it comes to the mortgage company approving a loan for this property, because if the lights work, if there's a furnace, if there's hot water, if the roof isn't leaking, the banks are a lot more confident cutting that check in comparison to if the furnace and hot water tank are gone. Backyard needs a little bit of work. So does mine. Comes with a garage. I do see some concrete work that will eventually need to be taken care of. But at the very least, this is a property that is $165,000. And I would say that that's a pretty good deal, especially in the 48221 zip code. Now, I am not a realtor. That's a quick disclaimer. And so if you're looking at properties in the city of Detroit, I do recommend you connect with a realtor in order to make sure you're making the right decision. Let's check out one more house. This house is for sale at $290,000. House looks really, really good. Brick home. This house has slate roof. And so what that also means is the repair cost on that slate roof is going to be massive. But this property looks really good. Kitchen looks solid. You have some beautiful hardware on those cabinets and everything looks to be functional. I'm not sure if this is AI staged or not, so I'll throw that disclaimer in there. They may have a description of such within the description itself that I did not read. But for the most part, this house looks lived in, right? This property looks solid. And this is a property that's under $300,000. You got radiator heat. I do have radiator heat as well. I am a fan of radiator heat. In the winter time, the property stays warm and the heating bill is not too massive. Bathroom looks good. Original windows, original hardware on the doors. Once again, these doors are solid wood from what I see. Maybe those are replacement doors over here in the closet area, but I can't guarantee that. But if these doors are solid wood, once again, that's another value add to this overall property. Now, when it comes to a monthly payment on $290,000, this is guesstimating that you bring 20% to the table. I would say that that's unrealistic for a majority of buyers. The city of Detroit does have down payment assistance for people who are moving into the city of Detroit, depending on certain circumstances. But let's say you're watching this and you actually qualify for down payment assistance of $15,000. That equates to about 5.2%. And that also gets your monthly payment to $23.13. I would probably bump that up an extra $300 to $400 a month for insurance and the adjustment in taxes once it transfers ownership. And so let's imagine that that's a $2,700 a month payment. This is a 4-bedroom house, 2,000 square foot home for $290,000. All brick home, slate roof. If you were to rebuild this property in 2026, this would probably cost you over $1 million easily in the exact same format it's in right now. Detroit's comeback is definitely real, but the bigger question is, what kind of comeback will this become? Will Detroit become another city where wealth floods in while long-term residents get pushed out? Or can Detroit actually create a model where growth, affordability, development, culture, opportunity, and community can all exist together? Because this city has already survived industrial collapse, white flight, bankruptcy, disinvestment, foreclosure crises, population loss, national ridicule, and somehow Detroit is still standing, still building, still fighting, still reinventing itself. That's why people are paying attention again. But I want to hear from you. Do you believe Detroit's population growth is sustainable? Are we witnessing a real comeback, or are we still too early to celebrate? And more importantly, who should benefit from Detroit's future? Drop your thoughts in the comment section, because trust me, this conversation is only getting started. Thanks for listening to me ramble. Would love to see you over in the Patreon community as well. That's where I drop a little bit more of a low-level vantage point of real estate development as well as entrepreneurship. Link is in the description below. See you in the next video.